All right, okay. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing extremely well. It is pretty sunny on this cold day here on a Tuesday here in Sulaco. Again, this is PLAR History and Geography here at WASA here in Sulaco. Again, my name is Jonathan. I'm your teacher for this course, PLAR History and Geography. All right. So today we're at week 4. So we're close to being halfway throughout the course. My goal is to continue looking at history this week, and my goal is to finish off the history half portion by the end of next week. Reminder, there's 2 more weeks until March break. So again, continue to work on those assignments, work on them, finish them, submit them once you get the chance. Okay? And then after that, my goal is to, after March break, once we're back around week 6 or week 5, give or take, maybe next week we'll start geography, but we'll see how far we get. Again, I don't want to rush anything. I want to take our time. We are moving along nicely. We do have lots of time, so we'll see how far we get. But again, my goal is to finish history by the end of next week, and then we'll switch gears and look at geography for the rest of the term. Okay? Reminder, like always, feel free to call in here at WASA Studio at 1-800-465-7144 if you want to listen and partake. That is 1-800-465-7144 if you want to call the WASA Studio. Again, feel free to tune in on your radio. I believe the station is 91.9 FM, so if you're in your car, listening to the radio, listening to some tunes, you're flipping through the radio, it's 91.9 FM, I believe. If you want to listen to me, Jonathan, PLAR History Geography here at WASA. Okay. Again, feel free to get in touch with me if you have any difficulties or have any questions. Again, feel free to give me a call in my office. Just call WASA. There's the local number, the 807 number, and there's the 1-800 numbers. Okay. Fax. Feel free to fax me your assignments. You can get in touch with me on my cell after my office hours or on weekends. Again, feel free to send me an email at jho@nnec.on.ca if you have any questions. Again, I'm on Facebook, Jho Wasa, and all my lessons are posted on my YouTube channel and on the NNEC Archive Wasa archive page. Other than that, not much exciting news is happening. I know that Royce from Fort Hope, our DC in Fort Hope, is in town right now doing some training. So if you want to stop by, say hello to him, you can do so. Other than that, are there any questions before we get started? So last week we started lesson number 2, where we looked at Canada and the Second World War period, which is between 1939 and, yes, if I guessed it, 1945. So I'm going to quickly zip through this slide, do a quick review, just to give everyone a fresh reminder of the contents and the background knowledge that we have been talking about. After that, we're going to get into today's class and today's learning goal. But first, let's go through some of these slides to refresh everyone's memory. So as you recall, last week, our learning goal, we talked about the background content of how the Second World War started. We talked about, Canada going to the war again. We talked about who was our prime minister during that time period, other than Mackenzie King. We talked about how to fight, otherwise known as Camp X, and a group of individual people who did not want to fight, otherwise known as the conspicuous objectors. So again, what led to World War II? Slightly different from World War I, but the main concept of all that political, economic, and social power of the European countries and empires during that time period was still fairly the same. You had a man named Adolf Hitler. He was the voice of reason and hope. He gave Germans the hope that they could be big and powerful once again. Germany, like Canada, was in a Great Depression period, so everyone was pretty down and sad. Germany had a government, again with Hitler. They formed the Fascism Party, otherwise known as the Nazi Party. He was voted into power in 1933 by the Germans. He pretty much brainwashed everyone, and everyone believed him. He promoted that the Jews cheated the country with false advertisements, and Hitler believed that you had to be German. Germany was the best ethnicity. Nothing else was seen ideal. So in his mind, everyone needed to be German, like German, and do everything like the German way. Because of Hitler and his goals of expanding the German Empire and seeing that he is the best and wanted to acquire wealth, land, and power as much as possible, he teamed up with Italy and their leader as Benito Mussolini. He was also a dictator during this time period. So around 1936, Germany and Italy began an alliance where they teamed up with one another, and they started to invade countries such as Austria, Czechoslovakia, and other countries as well. The rest of Europe was like, whoa, what's going on? They saw this as a major threat to one another, and they told Germany and Italy to stop, but it did not happen. As a result, boom, Britain and France declared war on Germany, hence World War II started. I know we got Fort Hope on the line, calling here in the Wassa studio. Hello, Fort Hope. Can you all hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. How are you today? This is Sophie?
Yes,
It sounds like Sophie. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
Doing good?
Just a little behind.
Oh, that's okay.
And,
Hopefully you got all my feedback and all your marks for your assignments.
yeah.
Perfect. Do you have any questions about anything going on, about any of the content or any questions?
I just want to know how far you guys are now.
Well, last week on Thursday, we started lesson number 2, where we looked at Canada in the Second World War II period. That is assignment number 4. So right now I'm just quickly zipping through the same content from last class. And then today we'll be looking at the conclusion of the Second World War, where we'll be looking at assignment number 5.
Okay.
Okay? So hopefully you're around there. If you're ahead, which is great, so continue moving on. If you're a bit behind, that's okay too. Just continue to work on that. But again, Sophie, if you have any questions, just let me know. I know that your DC voice is in town here in Silicout, so which is great as well. Okay? Alright, so again, I'm gonna quickly review some of these slides from last class, which won't take too long, and then we'll get into today's lesson, which is a pretty short lesson. Okay, so Canada going to war again, yes. This is slightly different from World War I. Canada declared war on Germany itself. Canada did not have to follow what Britain did. Canada had its own sovereignty and had its own independence from Britain during this time period to some extent. So Canada declared war on Germany. Canada was not forced to join, but Canada and Canadians joined because the Depression left them with no jobs. Hence why there was nothing to do. Why not go to war? This slide talks about the rest of the world and Canada watching. Again, this is on your assignments. Arsenal Democracy. Why is Canada known as the Arsenal Democracy? Again, great hope on the home front. Men who didn't go to war. Women who stayed at home. Children who stayed at home. made huge contributions to the war efforts. Women take over many jobs and tasks in the factories. Children fundraise, make care packages and other duties in order to help fund the war efforts as well. So this is why Canada was known as the arsenal of democracy, because of its huge help collective effort to help fund the war. Okay, so again, that is a question on one of your assignments. Mackenzie King, yes, he was our prime minister during this time period. He established three measures. One, Unemployment Insurance Act. Two, the Family Allowance Act. And three, victory bonds. Okay, make sure you know each one and what each one stands for. So simply Unemployment Insurance Act. You can collect funds from the government, proving that you have provided proof that you have worked before becoming unemployed. Two, Family Allowance Act, otherwise known as the baby bonus. The more children you have in the household, the more funds you can collect in order to help pay for food, shelter, and clothing. And lastly, number three, victory bonds, similar to World War I. You can purchase these victory bonds and then later on cash these victory bonds for interest rate as well to get more money. Then we looked at Camp X. What was Camp X? Camp X is pretty much a secret training commando institution that was established here in Canada. Secret agent spies were trained how to fight. They learned many secret tactics such as secret codes, how to enter buildings, cliff climbing, weapons, getting off and on trains, crossing landscapes by nights. So this is something that Canada can be proud of, as we learn secret tactics that are still being used today. For example, here in Canada, we have the RCMP, down in the States, the FBI, all these secret codes and trainings strategies that they come up with. This was the start of Camp X. And finally, we look at the constituent objectors, who they were. Simply, they were a group of individuals, such as Mennonites, Jehovah's Witnesses. They did not believe in going to war. They refused. They didn't want to engage into any warfare battles or conflict. They believed that they should be neutral. So as a result, they did not fight. Again, these are all based on personal, deep, ethnical, religious reasons why they did not want to join the war. Okay? That's pretty much some of the main topics that we talked about last week on Thursday. Just to give everyone a quick refresher. And that was, again, topics on assignment number 4. So today, we'll be looking at assignment number 5. And I want to start this lesson by calling it the Canadian shame. The Canadian shame. And we'll get more to about in that in a second. Okay? But, like always, let's get to our learning goals. Okay, so our learning goal and our expectation for today's class is that by the end of today's class, you will have an understanding of Canada's role in World War II and Japanese involvement affecting Japanese Canadian. Okay, so we're still looking at Canada during the Second World War II period, but we're focused on Japanese Canadian and their involvement. So we're going to talk about the red, white, and blue. No, not the Montreal Canadiens, but we're talking about the United States. Oh no, Marco died again. Okay, we're going to talk about the United States and how they play a key role during the Second World War II period. We'll be looking at surprise. What that all means about. Like I mentioned, Japanese Canadian. And the challenges and struggles that they had to overcome and face during the Second World War II period. And finally, we will wrap up the conclusion of World War II and how that finished and what that played a role and how that impacted Canada as well. Okay? So, a fairly short lesson today, but we're going to continue looking at Canada, the Second World War II period. Again, I'm going to give you some more background content to what transpired and what led to the conclusion of World War II. We'll be talking about Japanese Canadian and how they play a role as well, and all the challenges that they had to overcome as well. Okay, so these are our learning goals for today's class and our expectation. Okay, and then we'll be looking at assignment number 5. Assignment number 5. Okay, any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Again, feel free to ask any questions throughout the lesson. Okay, this is everyone's class, so hopefully everyone can be engaged as well. United States, our neighbor down south. So we're talking about World War II. We know that France, Britain, Germany, Canada, Italy are all involved as well. But where is the big bad United States? Are they in the war? How come they're not in the war right now? Well, let's see what happened to them. So during this time period, we have a group of an alliance known as the Axis power. Okay, the Axis power, which consisted of Germany, Japan, and Italy. Okay, that's Germany, Japan, and Italy. These 3 countries form an alliance together where they teamed up with one another. Okay, and these 3 countries, the Axis power, pretty much fought against the Allies, which is France, Canada, and Britain, during the Second World War. So, the United States were not officially involved in the Second World War. Okay, they were pretty much neutral at this point. They simply just watched on, where everyone just fought and caused chaos. They just simply watched on. They were not involved at this point. However, the United States did provide supplies and aids to Britain, and they cut off ties with Japan. Okay, so the United States were not officially involved, but they helped provide supplies and aids to Britain, and they cut off ties with Japan. Where they did not help Japan. As a result of that, boom, we had events that took place in the United States, otherwise known as the attack of Pearl Harbor. Okay, Pearl Harbor in 1941. It was a surprise attack on the United States by Japan. So Pearl Harbor, if you don't know it, is located near Honolulu, Hawaii, which is pretty much like a little naval base. So Japan planned a surprise attack where they destroyed naval vessels, battleships, planes, all those ships and weapons that the United States have on Pearl Harbor. It was a surprise attack, caught the United States off guard. They did not expected it as well. The attack of Pearl Harbor, the surprise attack by Japan on the United States, was supposed to be an indicator of making the United States stop from entering the war. Okay, the purpose of the attack was to not make the United States enter the war. However, nope, that did not happen. Because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, made the big and bad United States even more angrier. It pretty much woke them up, and they officially declared war on Japan. And then Germany declared war on the United States. And boom, the United States are now officially a part of World War II. So that's pretty much how the United States got involved in all that. So what happened back here in Canada with the attack of Pearl Harbor, the attack on the United States, and now the United States are in the war? So Japanese Canadian back here in Canada, the Canadian government became suspicious. Something could be going on. The Canadian government became suspicious based on anyone, and I mean anyone, that is either Japanese, Germans, or Italians. Okay, if anyone in Canada were Japanese, Germans, or Italian during this time period, they were seen as suspicious according to our Canadian government. The Canadian government thought that Japanese, Germans, and Italians could be spies. Okay, we don't know. We know that Japan just planned a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on the United States. Maybe there could be a surprise attack here in Canada, perhaps. Okay, that was what Canadians and the Canadian government felt could be happening during this time period. Okay, Canada felt Japanese were cross the Pacific and eventually planned an attack on Canada. It took place in the United States, and we had a fear that Canada would be next. So anyone that's on the Axis power, so Japan, Germany, and Italy, and those people, we start to become suspicious about their actions and their behavior. Alright, racism and unfair treatment. Again, we'll be talking about racism and unfair treatment. So our main focus right now are Japanese Canadian. Okay, again, this is a time period of lots of unfair discrimination, racism taking place, mainly towards Japanese Canadian, based on their attack on Pearl Harbor. But this not just happened to Japanese Canadian, and again, it mainly took place with anyone of any different race or ethnicity. But we're focused on Japanese Canadian. In your textbook, it focused on Japanese Canadian. So what happened to Japanese Canadian during this time period? Well, a lot of Japanese Canadian during this time period lived out west on the coast of BC. As a result, since the Canadian government became suspicious of their actions and behavior, they were forced to move away from the west coast coastline, and they had to move to the interior of British Columbia, so an inland base. Husbands were separated from the family. The government took their properties, so any items or technologies or goods that they have, the government basically took it from them, and they basically used it to fund the war. Okay, David Suzuki was a Japanese Canadian. Some of you may recognize his name, David Suzuki, a famous Canadian environmentalist. Had to overcome these racism and unfair treatment. I once read a primary source on David Suzuki and his lived experience during this time period during World War II and what he and his family had to overcome. So in your textbook, there is an article that's entitled "The Silence is Broken." Okay, the silence is broken. This is in your textbooks, so make sure you read that article on that's entitled "The Silence is Broken." It really outlines all the unfair treatment that Japanese Canadian face during this time period. And again, some of the challenges and racism that they had to overcome was that they had to move away from the west coastline, and they had to move to the BC interior. Again, husbands are separated from the family. Government took their properties and sold them and funded them for the war. David Suzuki, famous Canadian environmentalist, was involved. And I put on my slide that the Canadian government did not apologize for the unfair treatment of Japanese Canadian until the late 1980s. Okay, there will be a question about the unfair treatment of Japanese Canadian on assignment number 5. So this slide is very, very critical. And make sure you read that article as well. The silence is broken. Okay? It will definitely help for sure. Alright, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism. What does that mean and what was going on? So anti-Semitism was racism, discriminated. It was a part of mainstream society during this time period. Okay, it was not something new, It's been going on in part of Canadian culture, society, lived experience throughout time. Okay, not just here in Canada, it's also a global ideology where it took place in other countries as well. So all these racism, unfair treatment, where people are being discriminated based on their race, gender, background, ethnicity, nationality. This is not new. Okay, this has been going on for time and time and time, not just here in Canada, but in other countries as well. That's why it's been a part of mainstream society for a long time, and it's a global ideology. And again, like I mentioned, these racism or these hate words or this unfair treatment were not just towards Japanese Canadians or Jews, but pretty much everyone. All other nationalities were subjected to something we know as anti-Semitism. Okay, they were seen different like I said, based on their nationality. Okay, this is everyone, not just Japanese or Jews. Okay, everyone. Okay, that's why I wrote other in quotation. All other nationalities were subjected to anti-Semitism. Okay, basically meaning that they were not treated the same or equally as everyone else would. After 1933, right after 1933, all Jews in Germany were required to wear a yellow star. Okay, so after 1933, all Jews in Germany were required to wear a yellow star to indicate that there were Jews living in Germany. Okay, this is an example of anti-Semitism where they were standing out based on their different nationalities, their ethnicities, their background. Again, Hitler in Germany during this time period saw the world as pure German. Okay, you had to be German. If you're not German, you were treated differently. Hence why all the Jews in Germany were required to wear a yellow star on their shirt. There was this little badge to indicate that they were Jews. Okay, no one else wore it except for Jews in Germany. Again, this is an example of anti-Semitism, unfair treatment. So again, anti-Semitism and all these racism had a place in Canada as well. It also impacted Canada. So Canada and the Jewish crisis, I like to entitle. So when Jews wanted to come to Canada during this time period, or wanted to immigrate or come to Canada for a better live experience, Canada simply said no. Canada simply said no. And this is their official response for Jews looking to come to Canada during this time period. Okay, again, this is the official response for Jews looking to come to Canada during this time period. And I quote, "Unfortunately, though we greatly sympathize with your circumstance, at present Canada is not admitting Jews. Please try another country." End quote. Okay, this was the official response from Canada, the Canadian government, if Jews were looking to come to Canada during this time period. Okay, so this whole racism, anti-Semitism, again, not just took place in Germany and other countries, it also took place here in Canada. All these effects of hate played a role too. I'll read that quote again. "Unfortunately, though we greatly sympathize with your circumstance, at present Canada is not admitting Jews. Please try in other countries." Okay. Again, this example of anti-Semitism that took place here in Canada during the Second World War II period. So let's talk about the Holocaust shortly, a little briefly. The Holocaust. Again, there will be a question on the Holocaust, so make sure you pay close attention and you know the purpose and the goal of the Holocaust and what that transpired. Again, before the Holocaust, again, we live in a world of anti-Semitism. Okay, I keep bringing that word up because it's really important to note that what took place during this time period, anti-Semitism. There were lots of hostility towards Jews. Okay, this is not something new. This took place throughout time, throughout history. There were lots of evidence that demonstrate that there were lots of hostilities and hate or unfair treatment towards the Jews. Like I mentioned, Hitler in Germany, they were obsessed. Okay, he was obsessed with the idea of pure German race. Okay, he wanted everyone to be pure German race. If you're not German, if you're not German or the race of German, it was not ideal to his mind. Again, Germany and Hitler wanted to expand his empire, which pretty much led to the Second World War. Okay, eventually, with this idea and this obsession with the pure German race and this anti-Semitism towards Jews, led to this, how would I classify it? This event known as the Holocaust. Okay, the event known as the Holocaust. So what was the Holocaust? Germans tried to eliminate all the Jews in the world or in Germany. Okay, he wanted to eliminate all the Jews. If you're Jews, he wanted to eliminate them. It was also noted that they were not just Jews, but gypsies or homosexuals. He wanted to eliminate those as well. Again, he wanted everyone to be pure German. So any homosexualities or Jews or any other race, he wanted to eliminate them completely. Again, had to be a pure German. Pure German. Just keep that in mind. Hitler and Germany saw the Jews as a threat to German society. As a result, the property were confiscated, and eventually all the Jews who were wearing this yellow marked star, they were eventually killed and murdered in these internal camps. In these internal camps, there were gas chambers, and eventually 6 million Jews were killed in a mass murder genocide. Okay, 6 million. 6 million Jews. Okay, they were placed in these camps, internal camps, and they were placed in gas chambers. It was started with people that were classified as useless. So anyone that was old, sick, or weak, they were killed and murdered first. And eventually they would go down the line and pretty much try to eliminate the whole Jews population in Europe and in Germany. Like I mentioned, 6 million were killed. These internal camps, otherwise known as the Holocaust, were kept a secret. They were kept a secret. People died from starvation, disease. They were killed and murdered in these camps or in gas chamber where they're eventually suffocated and die. So again, this is pretty much a dark period in terms of world history. Okay, so the impact of the Holocaust. Okay, lost families, high number of refugees. Hence why they wanted to come to Canada, but Canada said no. Displaced population, and they were placed around across Europe. So again, lost family, high number of refugees, displaced population, and they were eventually the people that were still alive and made it through the Holocaust. They were moved across Europe into different countries. Okay, so this was the Holocaust. Okay, otherwise you need to remember mass murder, genocide, trying to eliminate all the Jews because they were seen as a threat to German society and community. You had to be a pure German. Okay, that was the Holocaust. Okay, the Holocaust. Are there any questions? Any questions so far about the Holocaust or any other content that we talked about? All right. So we're gonna get to the conclusion of World War II. How did World War II wrapped up? Who won? Who lost? What happened? What led to the conclusion of World War II? Again, this is in your textbook. Okay, this is in your textbook. But again, I just pulled out key facts, key materials that I threw onto my slide. Okay, what I'm talking about are just the main points that everyone needs to remember. So just keep that in mind. So the conclusion of World War II started on 1944, otherwise known as D-Day. Okay, D-Day. Remember that name, D-Day. Okay, Allies. Okay, Allies. Okay, otherwise known as Canada and Britain. Okay, so the Allies landed in France on the coast of Normandy, where we sent our troops. This was pretty much the kickstart of the end of the World War II. It was like a mass invasion where Allies troops, Canada, and Britain, we sent our troops, like I said, on to Normandy on D-Day 1944, and it eventually kickstarted the end of World War II, where we pushed back the German troops. Okay, all these series of wars, battles, and conflicts, we eventually started winning all these battles. We started to push all the German troops and army and military back. 1945, VE Day, otherwise known as Victory Day in Europe. Okay, again, Allies troops invaded Germany. Again, we're winning all these battles. We started to push all the German troops back. Hitler eventually had a sense that they were going to lose. Germany was going to lose. His plan, his notion in place was going to fall. As a result, he committed suicide. Okay, Hitler committed suicide. And a week later, the German party of the Nazi party eventually surrendered. Which means pretty much the war is over. Boom. Canada, Britain, France, United States, all the allies, we won. We won. They were victorious in World War II. They eventually liberated and freed all the Jews that were in the camps. However, and I say the word again, however, the United States was still fighting a war with Japan. Even though the Allies, the United States, and Canada, Britain, defeated Germany and the Nazi Party, the United States were still fighting a war with Japan. So what happened? The United States eventually dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima of Japan, which is a city in Japan. The United States decided to drop a nuclear bomb, okay, this devastated mass weapon atomic bomb on Hiroshima. By dropping this nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, it pretty much killed thousands of Japanese instantly. Okay, instantly. Okay. However, Japan did not surrender. As a result, boom, the United States dropped a second nuclear bomb, atomic bomb, on the city of Nagasaki. Again, that also killed thousands of Japanese instantly. And eventually, Japan had enough, and they eventually surrendered, which finally concluded World War II. Okay, the United States came on top of Japan, and World War II was finally over. Okay, so these are the key events and key dates that took place, which led to the conclusion of World War II. Okay. So looking back, reflecting back, based on last class content of World War II and the material that we reviewed today and learning goals that we went over today, looking back on World War II, okay, looking back on Canada in the 1940s period, okay, there was shame, okay, hence why I entitled this lesson The Canadian Shame. There was shame. Canadian attitude towards other ethnicities was not always admirable. We have to accept our nation's responsibility for treatment of Jews and other race during World War II. Okay? I'll say it again. 1940 shame. Canadian attitude towards other ethnicities were not always admirable. We have to accept our nation's responsibility for treatment of Jews and other race during World War II. Okay, again, lots of anti-Semitism, race, discrimination, unfair treatment, hatred was going on. Okay, Canadians played a role. Canadian government played a role. Okay, and we have to respect our responsibility based on our actions. Okay. However, not all were bad. Okay, not all were bad. 1940 secret. Okay, not all contributions were made on the battlefield. Canadians, yes, us Canadians can be proud of the contribution we made by Camp X as a part of the World War II efforts. So that's a secret training commando institution, otherwise known as Camp X, that was established here in Canada. We can be extremely proud of that. Okay, about that institution. So the significance, as historians, or while studying history, as historians, people who study history or look at history, or history majors, as historians, we must remember to keep all aspects of all history alive, the good and the bad. Okay, so when we're looking at history, okay, Canadian history or world history or ancient history, as historians, you must keep in mind all aspects, okay, the good and the bad. We can't just talk about the good parts of what we did in Canada. I can't just be here in class, talk about what all the good things that Canada did. You must keep in mind the good and the bad, okay? The good and the bad, okay? It's really important that we keep both aspects in mind when we're studying and looking at history, okay? The good and the bad. For example, residential school that impacted Indigenous, First Nations, Aboriginal population, okay? That can be a dark side as well in terms of Canadian history, and as a result of residential school, for example, we Canadians must take that into account, look back, and take that into account as well. We cannot just forget that, okay? We can use that as a teaching tool as well. Hence why we need to look at the good and the bad aspect as history. Okay, so just keep that in mind every time you're looking at any history topics. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? So that pretty much wraps up today's lesson on the conclusion of World War II, Japanese-Canadian involvement during World War II. So right now, we're going to go over questions on assignment number 5. Okay, question on assignment number 5. So Sophie, Yellowhead, and Fort Hope, if you are working on assignment 5, I'm going to take some time right now and just go over these questions, and so that you'll have a clear understanding of what each question is asking and what I'm looking for. Again, all my expectations are the same. Keep that in mind. Please, and I mean please, okay, write in full, complete sentences with details. Don't just copy straight from the textbook, okay? Hopefully your DC can reiterate that, because that's really critical, okay? Question assignment number 5 out of 10 marks, okay? Simple 10 marks, nothing big. Question number 1, why did the Canadian government focus attention on its Japanese citizens following the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Okay. In other words, what happened towards Japanese Canadians after Pearl Harbor? What did we Canadians and the Canadian government do? What did we focus on after the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Okay. So why did the Canadian government focus attention on its Japanese citizens following the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Okay, that's out 2 marks. Question number 2. Give specific details about the mistreatments Japanese Canadians endured from the Canadian government following the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Okay, we talk about mistreatment. Okay, mistreatment. So if you read the article in your textbook that I talked about, it really will help for this question, okay? So give details. Okay, give details. Not just give me a couple examples, but give me a few, okay? Give details about the mistreatment Japanese Canadians had to overcome from the Canadian government following from the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Again, that's out of 3 marks. Okay? Question number 3. Question number 3. What was the Holocaust? Okay, that's out of 2 marks. So what was it? Why did it take place? What was the goal? What was the purpose? What was it? What was the Holocaust? Okay. And question number 4, the last question on assignment number 5. Okay. Outline the events in 1944 and 1945 that brought the end of the Second World War. Okay. So tell me the key events that transpired that took place between 1944 and 1945 that brought the ending of World War II. Okay, that's out 3 marks. Okay, and that right there, class, is assignment number 5. Again, a short assignment with our short lesson out of 10 marks. Okay, and nothing that I'm asking is out of the blue. Again, all these answers are in your textbook. Okay, all these answers are covered in my slides in my lesson. So again, you can make sure you read the textbook. Again, make sure if something doesn't make sense, you go back and watch it on my YouTube channel or listen to it on the archive page, or just ask me, and I will help guide you through these questions. Okay. So remember, full complete sentences, details. Okay, you want full marks, details. Again, check for spelling, grammar. Okay, make sure you write neatly. Okay. If you follow those simple rules, you will always receive full marks. Okay, just keep that in mind. Okay, because we don't want to be doing all these assignments over and over again. But again, if you're unsatisfied with your mark, you can always redo those assignments. You can always submit them to me again, and I will always mark them. Okay, you can redo all these assignments 100 times, and I will mark it 100 times, and I will always improve your mark every time you submit these assignments. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So if you're unsatisfied or unhappy with your mark that you received the first time, you can simply redo it, follow my feedback that I gave you, and that should help. Okay? Any questions? Any questions? Does that all make sense, Sophie? Are you still there, Sophie?
Yes, I'm still here. Makes sense.
Makes sense. Any questions? Everything's all good?
Yeah, it's all good.
Perfect. Are you working on assignment 4 or assignment 5 right now?
Yeah, I'm gonna start on assignment 4 and finish my assignment 5. And I'll hand in my 3 assignments after.
Okay, so you're done number 5, but you're working on number 4. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have to go back.
No worries. No, okay, that's okay. As long as you're working on your assignments, right? So I want to make note to see how far you are. That's all. Again, Sophie, continue to work hard. Continue to work on these assignments. Okay. Hopefully, all my feedback makes sense. Again, like I said, full, complete sentences, details, details, details. You want to see full marks. Okay. Again, I'm not asking for anything huge, but do make sure you take the time and answer those questions. Read each question carefully and make sure everyone answer what is being asked. Okay, don't just leave out certain parts. That way you won't receive full marks. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up today's class. So on Thursday, 2 days from now, March 3rd, on Thursday, we'll be wrapping up lesson number 2. Again, we'll go over questions on assignment number 6. We'll be looking at after World War II and defense organizations. Again, this is a pretty short lesson that I have for Thursday, but we might start the next one if we have time. But we're going to look at what happened In Canada in the 1950s, what happened after World War II in terms of what changes happened. When I mean changes, I'm talking about political changes that happened here in Canada and other defense organizations that emerged in the 1950s. Okay, all that will be deal with assignment number 6. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, I want to start that right now, but I will restart that lesson next class on Thursday. Okay, so we're looking at Canada after World War II and defense organization. We'll wrap things up by looking at lesson number 2 in 1950s, Canada 1950s. Okay. So again, class, continue to work on those assignments. It doesn't matter which assignment you're working on, but please continue to work on it. Again, please continue to submit those assignments. That way I can mark it. Okay? Any last questions, comments, concerns before we call it a class? No other questions, Sophie? Everything makes sense? Everything's on the right track? Are you just working on PLAR history and geography, Sophie?
Yeah.
So you're just working on my course?
I have other assignments to me.
For different courses?
Yeah.
Are you working on the other PLARs as well? Like other like English, math, and science as well?
Yes.
Okay.
All of them.
All of them? Oh wow, taking all 4 at once. Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, so I know people are busy. I know people have family, people work. But again, always continue to work on those assignments whenever you get the chance. Okay? And submit them to me, especially doing the history and geography. Okay? Alright, so Sophie, again, if you have any questions, send me a Facebook message. That goes towards everyone. Without further ado, I think I'll wrap things up, and I'll